Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am Courtney Anderson, and this is episode 162. Episode 162, wow, of this show. Thank you for joining me today. Of course, this is our daily show that runs Monday through Friday, airing usually live or for the first time at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern U.S. Time zone. So, episode 162, what's going on today? Well, this is a show that is part of our MYTH Warriors series. Our MYTH Warriors series, of course, is an entire series devoted to sharpening our critical thinking skills, ensuring that we are both in a situational awareness focus so that we have offensive tools that we're going to use to get out there in life and prod and poke and test and question to see whether concepts, ideas, things that are out in the public arena are potentially credible, something that we should trust. Or, in the alternative, are they lies? Are they myths? Are they fallacies or fantasies? And if so, still interesting, but not something I'm going to base my decision on if I'm looking for pragmatic, real-world application outcomes. So today in our MYTH Warriors series, our specific show is one that I just have a smile on my face because I'm excited about it, but I also have addressed this show topic for over 15 years, probably closer to 20, in different professional settings, as a lawyer, as a professor, and certainly as a speaker, corporate trainer, and educator. It's just one of these topics that I come back to over and over again. So what is it? Our episode topic today is you don't have to do anything that you don't want to do. You don't have to do anything that you don't want to do. And again, this may be something that is so seemingly simple. You know, we have so many different types of programs, and of course, they're all around these very central themes. One, how can we surpass our goals, and how can I be of assistance helping you surpass your goals? The other thing we talk about constantly is practicing the joyful art of business. The idea that whatever we're doing with our professional activities, whether they're paid or volunteer, we need to take the time to measure and remain vigilant in regards to our emotional and psychological responses, so that we don't get in a situation where we are miserable and we shouldn't be. So the idea is you don't have to do anything that you don't want to do. I mentioned I had a smile on my face because, and then I said I talked about this concept so many different times. So let's jump right into it. I want to encourage you, as always, come to CourtneyAnderson.com. That's our central website for all the different things that we're doing with the shows and programs, and it's also just a central site for me. So that's where our blog is. It's where this talk show is, the audio version or radio talk show. We also have a video television version of this television show, articles, and we're adding so much more content. There's a show episode page. This is episode 162. So when you come to CourtneyAnderson.com, go to page 162. The whole page is devoted to the show. You'll be able to download the program if you haven't already done so. You'll be able to read the full show notes, click on all the links, anything that I refer to, see, and please visit and support our show sponsors that are helping us put the resources into the program, the materials, the courses, and building everything up as quickly as we possibly can to be of assistance for you. Also want to encourage you to go to iTunes, leave your ratings or any other resource that's out there to share programs and knowledge, and put your feedback and reactions and ideas. One, share them with me. Let me know what's happening. So contact me. Of course, you can do that through the website. And the other thing is put it on your social media. I do want to mention that we have, again, been growing and changing and adding all these materials, and we have made some technical changes to the show feed, our RSS feed. So if you go to CourtneyAnderson.net, you'll see the actual RSS feed. So just in case you were accessing it one place and you're having an issue You can always come to CourtneyAnderson.com. Links to everything are there. And then, of course, our permanent RSS feed will be at CourtneyAnderson.com. CourtneyAnderson.net, which you can access through, CourtneyAnderson.com. All right. What's that all about? Well, it's about the fact that, again, we have put so much work into these shows. They've grown so popular. We have so many listeners around the world. It's amazing. I'm working feverishly, literally almost around the clock, to do everything I can to get everything technically set up correctly and expand our programs and make this something that's more accessible to people and the best quality it can be. When I said that I have used our show topic today, which is you don't have to do anything that you don't want to do, that I've talked about this for years, I have. So let's talk about some of the instances and then let's address and see, is it a myth, right? Is it a lie, a trick, a fallacy, a falsehood? Or might this actually be something that's accurate, maybe even something that's credible that we could base decisions on? So for many, many, many years, I've had the joy and the privilege to be a keynote speaker and to do corporate education and corporate training programs. And so in those settings, what I do professionally is clients hire me and then I go to their event. So I go to their management leadership program, I go to their seminar, I go to their convention, I go to their event, and then the way I do this is I always create original content and I tailor it to that specific client event and need, and I do everything in my power to immerse myself in exactly what's happening in that room. So for the attendees in that industry, what their challenges are, and then of course try to bring, of course, my same principles: surpassing our goals, being pragmatic, and making sure that we're aware of our emotional reaction. The joyful art of business. So one of the things I've said over many, many years when I go to events, especially when I go to an event where it is a mandatory event, so not one where it's a really awesome keynote, it's the annual conference, it's the looked forward to seminar where people voluntarily come. But when I do mandatory work, often in the corporate education, corporate training sphere, that's something where I go to somebody's office. So the people who usually are coming to the program, they weren't super excited necessarily, or even often aware that we were even having the program. Just, the manager or somebody told them they had to come. We're having some kind of a meeting. And a lot of that is around things that you would think, okay, management training, a lot of the legal issues that we deal with around the world with hiring and retention and employee engagement. We talk about being aware of our environment at work so we don't have any situation where somebody else is being harassed or discriminated against, all of that good stuff. And most of the time, these programs are very well received. The people have taken time away from their traditional work activities to attend the meeting, and even though it's mandatory, they're usually, really interested, right? Because like I said, I tailor it and I create the whole program around their work, what they do day in and day out, things that are important to them, their paycheck, their organization, their employer, what's happening in their lives. And so, like I said, overwhelmingly, really, really informative. I always learn something when I do these programs. And like everything in life, there are instances where people are less than thrilled to come to the on-site program at their workplace or some place that their workplace is found for everyone to come. They needed a slightly different location. And there have been times where people aren't really excited. They really aren't. Sometimes they actually say that. Sometimes they say it to me. They say they say to me, "Are you the person, the meeting?" They're not really excited. And who knows what's going on in their lives? It's not personal. We're fully aware of that because we talk about that in so many programs, right? The thing that's really important that ties to our program today is that at the beginning of many of my programs, for especially these mandatory programs, where sometimes I've done hundreds and hundreds of these programs over the last decade and a half. So overwhelmingly awesome, exciting, wonderful. Every once in a while, there have been people who've been less than excited to be there. And I'll make the statement at the early in the program. I'll say something like, you don't have to be here. And I will get a lot of people sort of nod and speak up and say, you're right. We don't. But I've had an occasion where people have been very assertive, which is awesome, right? We love assertive, confident people who speak up and share and communicate, especially things that are important to them. If I've had people say to me things like, you're wrong. I have to be here. They told me to. It's mandatory. And then I'll ask the question, okay. I'll say, well, do you have to work? And I'll get some people say, no, you don't have to work. But then I'll get people who've challenged that idea and said, that's not true. I have to work. I have bills to pay. Maybe you don't have to work, but I have to work. Okay. So I've asked this question, and I have asked this question in the States and in Canada and in Mexico and in Australia and in India and in South Africa and in the Netherlands and in Spain and in Italy. The list goes on. And in Japan and in Hong Kong. Okay, I've asked the question, do you have to work? And then I get people, I have to. I have bills to pay. And then I'll ask the question, do any of you know someone who could work? Physically could work, mentally could work. So they're not disabled or unable to work. They could work, but they choose not to. Do you know anybody like that? And then, universally, I've gotten someone to say, yeah, I do. And then if it's a comfortable space and I feel that we're in a safe environment and we have the time available in our program, I'll share little quick anecdotes about my life experience. I personally know people who could work, healthy, mentally, physically, but choose not to. Some of these people I've just known in life, I've met here and there. Some people have been very, very distant relations, family members, very, very distant, very distant. So distant, I don't even remember which very distant family member it might have been. But I have memories fleetingly. The point is simply this. It is not accurate that you have to go to work, because there are people who could go to work but do not want to go to work. There are people who are offered jobs and don't go and turn them down. There are people who have jobs and refuse to show up. So, yes, is that an exhaustive, absolute answer to the question of do people in a specific meeting room have to come to the job? No. Is it a general principle that I'm putting forward to establish that there are options? You don't have to come to this job. You don't have to come to this job and come to the meeting. Sometimes I'll say, when I'm talking to people and say, well, I have to come to work, I have to pay my taxes. Okay, again, I'll ask the question, are there people that don't pay their taxes? And then I'll have to even, no, if you don't pay your taxes, you get in trouble. And then I'll ask this question. Remember, one of the other things I've done and continue to do as my schedule permits in a way that on projects that I think are really interesting, is practice law as a lawyer. So I'll say, okay, so if you tell me that you have to do stuff, and my argument is you don't have to go to this job. In fact, you don't have to go to any job. My argument also is when people say to me, you have to pay your taxes, that's actually not accurate, because there are people in jail, in federal prison right now for what? Not paying their taxes. So you can't say to me that you have to do it when I can show you people who have chosen not to do it and are paying the price. Now, there are other people who choose not to pay their taxes who have not been discovered by the authorities and aren't in jail. So that's another population we could assume is larger than the one that's incarcerated. So I'm giving you real life examples to refute the argument that you have to do this and you have to do that. And this is really an underlying principle that people build really poor analysis on top of. So somebody says, well, I have to work, which is not accurate, because we could sit here and have a lifetime of discussions and analysis of people. And again, this is a small population. The majority of people in the world, most of what we talk about in all of our programs, of course, are how to get the most out of our careers and the fulfillment we want and the skill development and the challenges and the growth and the emotional needs and all the positive things from work. I'm an unabashed And I've been a very vocal supporter of believing that there's so many wonderful outcomes to work and business itself. That's one of the reasons that I do all the things that I do in this sphere. And that's the whole purpose of being such a proponent of the idea of being of service and being active in some way. I don't care if it's paid work or volunteer work. I don't care if it's full-time or part-time. I don't care about any of that, but you need to have some things, some tasks, some ideas or some projects or something that you're doing, that you're looking forward to, that are in progress, that you are able then to contribute to the society. So yes, I do. I have said this everywhere. And again, not at all. Have I ever been coy about this? So what I'm saying is somebody puts forward the argument I have to work, which is not accurate at all. And again, that's a minority, a tiny, tiny percentage of people, but they do exist and they're everywhere that I've ever encountered a human. So they and their presence is another example of what I'm putting forward to say that this right their existence is showing that this is inaccurate, that you have to work at this job. And in fact, I will go to some places, not any place I've been in a really long time, but I've been to some places, and this again is over 15, 16 years, and definitely as a lawyer. So as a lawyer, I certainly represented people who I represented both sides. I represented employers, organizations who had legal issues regarding employees and hiring and things of that nature. And then I also represented people who worked at places as employees who had the same type of legal issues. So I've certainly seen all sides of this. The reality is that you don't have to work. And as I said, I've been to places in some of these settings a long time ago where I've asked, and I've actually known, especially as a lawyer, I've had information. I'll say to people, have you ever worked with anybody in your career? They were there one day at work and then they just never showed up again? Have you ever known anybody who just walks out in the middle of a shift, just leaves? And people, yeah, I sure have. See, exactly, proves my point. So the reason I said that people build these really faulty logic on top of these really inaccurate assumptions, because since you don't have to work, then you can't layer on top of that, I have to work, and my boss said I had to come to the meeting, and then I'm in this meeting and I hate the meeting and I hate everything, and it's because I have to do it. None of that's accurate. You don't have to come to the meeting. You don't have to listen to your boss. You don't have to work at all in this organization or anywhere if you don't want to. Now, is there a price to pay for that? Yes. If the trade-off is I'm not going to work, in most parts of the world that I've worked in, which makes sense because I'm there doing professional speaking and corporate education programs and speaking with universities, things of that nature, I'm in places where there's an infrastructure. So, and we humans, we share. So if you're a human and you're unable to work, then the places on the planet, the majority of the places on the planet, we have a system in place. We're not going to leave somebody who's disabled or elderly, ill and able to work. We provide so that they have food and shelter and their basic ability to live a life. Water, food, things of this nature. They have different systems in different countries and different regions, but in general, that's the idea, right? We are a species, and we share, because that could be any of us. Any of us at any time could go through something and not be able to work. Okay, even the group who could work but just chooses not to. And in most parts of the world, there's a system there. We're not going to let you starve, right? There are going to be resources available. Now, there may be, again, differences in the system. Some systems may say, well, you need to be working on some kind of, program. Hopefully, where in the future you can work. Maybe a training or education or some sort of a certain amount of jobs you're applying for, or whatever. But the trade-off is the trade-off. It's the same argument through all of this. You don't have to pay your taxes. If you don't pay your taxes and you live in a part of the world where there's infrastructure and people enforce the law, and there's a likelihood that you're going to get penalized, if you get penalized, well, then you chose to do that. If you tell me that you have to do something, I'm going to ask you some follow-up questions to try to clarify what it is you're telling me. You're making the assertion is, I have to do this. And I have not yet found the thing that you really have to do. I've found things people like to do, and I've found things that people feel like if they want the benefits of something, then they'll do it. In other words, some people say, well, yeah, I could not work, but then I'm not going to be able to, have much money. Well, yeah. unless somebody gives it to you, maybe a relative or friend or something. But in most parts of the world, even in societies that are very focused on good infrastructure and sharing, you're going to have less resources than you would if you went out and you worked and brought in a strong income. That's a trade-off. Many people say, well, I'd rather have more resources. And of course, there are all these other wonderful benefits, right? You have something that you're part of that's larger than yourself. You're being of service. You're using your intellectual skills. You're using your physical skills in some way because you're moving in some aspects. You're engaging in our society in some aspect. So many people say, well, I have to work if I want the lifestyle I want. Well, no. What that means is if you want the lifestyle you want, you're willing to go out then and make different sacrifices. But you don't have to do any of it. You don't have to have that lifestyle. You just want it. And when we talk about words, we did a program recently. It was replace try with do, and it was all about words. So don't say I'm going to try to do that. Just say I'm going to do that. And if you're not going to do it at all, then just don't even talk about it. Because when you say you're going to try to, basically it means nothing, right? What does try mean? Did it mean that you just thought about it? And it leads to misunderstanding and confusion. So my argument is I want to be as specific as possible with our words. It's part of us continuing to evolve and learn from experiences in life and better articulate our needs and interests and ideas and curiosities. We have to continue to think about how we express ourselves. If you want something, then just say you want it. But you don't have to do that. And the reason I harp on this and I get a bit emphatic about it is because it's such an excuse. It's such an excuse for behavior. Right? So the truth is, if you're at work and you chose to be there and you chose to stay there and someone shared with you that there's a meeting that you were instructed to go to and you choose to go to it, why come to it and then sit there and complain about how you don't like it? The truth is you didn't have to come here at all. You don't have to stay at this job. You can do whatever you want to do. But to go and make all these choices, right? Choose to work at this place, choose to follow whatever instruction to come to some whatever meeting, and then sit there in the place that you chose to do all these things to and complain about it doesn't make any logical sense. Leave. Have I said to people, not in the corporate education and training program, certainly as a lawyer, when my own clients that I'm working with very aggressively to try to help them resolve the legal issue when they keep making choices. So if someone has a legal case and part of their criminal case is they have to go to certain classes and learn maybe about anger management. Maybe they have to go and have drug testing through the local courts and or probation infrastructures to make sure that they don't have a relapse potentially of using or abusing drugs and or alcohol. And then people say to me, well, I have to do this. No, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do any of this. If you don't want to do these things, then you need to tell me so that I don't, as your lawyer, go and make all these arrangements for you not to face incarceration in exchange for taking the classes, coming and taking and passing your drug test. You don't have to do that. If you don't want to do that, tell me. And when I get really assertive like that and I say, leave or tell me, is because I've shared in other programs, which is my own failings and failures. Especially when I was really, really young, relatively speaking. So when I was in my 20s, I didn't fully understand how different we all are. Just as individuals. And I made really poor choices. I went into criminal cases and other legal issues thinking what I would want, right? So in a criminal case, my thought would be, I don't want to go to jail at all, period, ever. So that to me is we're not even going to talk about that because I enjoy so much of my life. I enjoy my work and being with you in the programs and then where I live and then just spending time free, walking around, exercising, being with my friends and doing things I enjoy. I can't do those things if I live in this different lifestyle. So that's my perspective. But I made mistakes early on, like I said, especially in my 20s, because I went into work situations based on what I thought I wanted. I thought, well, I have to do this. But I didn't have to do it because I wasn't listening. And my clients really didn't want to do it at all. They didn't want to go to a meeting. They weren't going to pass a drug test. They didn't want all the hassle of trying to get transportation and go here and go there. And they didn't want all that. And I have to listen. And it's the same thing with the other situations. It's not the same severity, but it's definitely the same mindset. If someone says to me, "Oh, I had to come to this conference. Oh, I had to be part of this event." No, you don't. No, you don't. At all. Sometimes people will say to me, "Well, that's just not true. I've got a elderly parents, and I've got kids, and I've got my spouse, and I've got my sister-in-law, and I've got all these responsibilities. I have to do this, and I have to do that, and I have to go here, and I have to go there." Stop. Actually, not accurate. Unfortunately, people get into situations that they are not able at the time to continue as a parent, as an adult child. Right? Again, that could happen to anybody. In some instances, people are a bit more mature and immediately reach out and let whatever part of society that they need to let know and say, "I cannot take care of my elderly parent. I cannot take care of my minor child." And then there are social services and agencies and nonprofits and all types of groups around the world who will step in and have procedures in place to take custody and oversee and do everything that they can to make sure, again, as humans, we are, again, I talked about earlier, right? We share. Right? We share collectively through helping each other. We share collectively with contributing parts of what we may have in terms of resources through taxes. We share. As a lawyer, I've mentioned currently, and for many years, I've done a lot of different types of volunteer work, and I've certainly worked on cases with minor children, little children who sometimes, again, like I said, a person does the mature thing and reaches out as soon as they become aware of the situation that they're not able at that time to take care of someone that they're responsible for, and because they're usually not able to take care of themselves. Maybe they're dealing with an addiction or some type of life challenge. Maybe they don't have any economic stability. It could be a variety of things. In some instances, people don't reach out, and society becomes aware of a situation. Maybe an elderly parent or elderly relative is neglected, and people become aware of it. The same thing happens with minor children, and then sometimes people come in and take custody, and it's not where the person stepped up and let society know. Sometimes society finds out, and then society steps in, and sometimes it can be contentious, where people are angry that society's coming and asking questions and checking to see how people are doing. In any event, my argument is this. Those, again, are examples of people who know. Just because you have an elderly parent who might be in need doesn't mean you have to do anything. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't do something. And in most instances, of course, that's what people do. But it depends on the situation. It depends on what the relationship was. It depends on if it's a safe environment. It depends on the capabilities of the person. And we all probably are aware of, for the best prepared person, the burden of extended caretaking. And we've seen this with elderly spouses together, especially through long conditions of deterioration. This is not an easy task. What's my point? My point is not that the underlying issue, work, taxes, following the law, taking care of relatives, that's not the issue. The issue is what you're doing, and that's the issue. And the episode title is, you don't have to do anything that you don't want to do. My argument is that this is not a myth. This is accurate. It is not a lie. It is accurate. You don't have to do anything that you don't want to do. And that's what I was trying to share little anecdotes of different times I've said to people, You don't have to do this. You don't have to work at this place. You don't have to go, follow this legal procedure or take these classes because of a criminal case. You don't have to do anything with your family of origin or anybody else. You don't have to, because I'm giving you all these examples of people that aren't doing it. Now, I'm not at all defending that. There are huge ramifications if somebody quits a job or walks out of a job. It is a very tough choice if someone who's able to work just refuses to. They put themselves in a situation, and I've done other programs unrelated to this broad topic necessarily, but to specific. So we've done financial fierceness shows where we talk about being financially independent and all the assets and advantages that gives you in life and how much easier your life is, right? So my as an individual, my personal, advice as a community member, if as someone we're working together by virtue of you being part of the program, if you were my personal, friend and in my life, I'd say to you, of course not. Of course you don't do that. You don't quit a job. You don't refuse to pay your taxes. You don't break the law and then refuse to atone for it or pay the fine. You don't have a family member that's a healthy and safe environment. Of course, I had to keep saying this because there are people who will say, well, I had to take care of the person, they were my relative, and then the person actually may be abusing and assaulting them. And this happens more often than you may be aware of if you're not privy to that type of data or experience. But go to your local court and you'll be able to either see or read about whatever is public in your part of the world. But this happens all the time. So we have to maintain and make sure that there's a healthy situation. But as long as it's a healthy situation, of course you step up. Of course you take care of responsibilities. Of course you do. Again, all the ramifications of all of these situations where people get into situations and then they realize that it's not something that they can sustain or that they're able to or that they want to, it would be much easier. The easiest thing to do is to think before you get into the situation. So don't take a job that you're 1,000%, I know that's inaccurate, but if you're absolutely confident that you're not going to like it and you don't want to do it, then just say no. You'd be better off working on your skills and maybe working less prestigious work or something just to kind of get by. But don't take the job and say, oh, the job's going to require me to live in a part of the world, and I hate that part of the world because it's too cold, and I don't want to live where it's cold. And don't go where it's cold and then sit there for 20 years and complain about how cold it is. You went there, and then don't tell me you had to go there. Because even if it was true you need to go there for a short amount of time, you've had to stay there for 20 years, and there's nothing you could have ever done. I think where you can see is my main argument is simply how this ties into the issue of joyful art of business. We're not joyful when we're complaining, being rude, berating, belittling other people. The way that it usually comes out that someone feels they have to do something is because they're complaining about it. Rarely do you hear someone say, oh, I was at work and I had this opportunity to help one of my customers, and I had to do it. It was just awesome. You don't usually get that, although you should. I think it's because the language sounds inaccurate. When we feel like we have to do something, then that means we don't have a choice, right? I don't have a choice. I don't have a choice to come to this meeting. I don't have a choice to work at this place. I don't have a choice to live in cold weather. I don't have a choice to have that, child or parent or stepsister or whatever. I don't have a choice. And the reality, though, is you have all kinds of choices. They're not great choices. They're not choices that, like I said earlier, that in most instances would be something we'd recommend. But that may be the right choice for you. It may be that you're overwhelmed and you can't carry on with the responsibilities you have. It may be that you know how you are, and if you're somewhere where the weather is in your mind what you call too cold, it's just not going to work. You're going to be too unhappy. And it doesn't matter about anything else that happens in your life. I might ask you to reassess your position, but these are usually from a negative perspective, and they're an angry perspective. I had to do this. I had to do this. And the truth, again, is you do not have to do this. Now, of course, this program and everything that we do is intended only for adults. I'm not talking to you if you're, 4 years old. If you're 4 years old, then there's a lot of stuff you're going to have to do because you're a child. And your parents or grandparents or adult caregivers or whoever is going to have all kinds of requirements, mostly that are based on your safety because you don't understand a lot about the world at 4, right? So that, that's where most of it's coming from. I can't just let you wander around. You're mobile, but you don't know anything about understanding traffic and the dangers that are out there. So that's why I'm giving all these rules, right? Because you're 4 years old. I'm not talking to 4-year-olds. This program is only for adults. Everything we do in our community is adult focus. Although we do some work. I work with children in some instances, and we do some programs for young people. But those are very specific to young people. This isn't specific to young people. We're all talking schools and things of that nature. This is an adult telling me they have to do this. And my point is, you do not. This is not a myth. I'm sorry. This is a myth that you don't have to do anything that you don't want to do is not a myth. Thank you. It is a myth that you have to do it. You're an adult. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. If you're in a situation where literally and this does happen, right? Literally you've been kidnapped and you're being forced to perform some sort of labor, well, then that's illegal. Slavery is illegal. Human trafficking is illegal. Does that happen? Yes. If that's happening, please seriously reach out to me. I mean, let's see what we can do to reach out to and get you in touch with the agencies, law enforcement, and community groups to stop this. Of course. The ability for us as individuals, and then of course collectively and in society, to be able to understand what we have to do versus all the other things is really important. Now, there are things that you feel you should do. Are there things that you feel that you'll be judged poorly if you don't do? That's totally different. You don't have to do it. Are there consequences to not doing it? Yes. Are those consequences in some instances really uncomfortable? Yes. Some people will say, "Well, you're just living in a naive world. There are things we have to do." And they'll give me an example of some situation where somebody doesn't do something. Not only will they be judged harshly by society, but maybe they'll be punished. My personal perspective and the people that I admire immensely from a very broad historical perspective are people who, even when they live in a time and in a place where they're told you have to do this or you have to do that, they will have ethical frameworks integrated often with religious frameworks or political frameworks, and they'll realize that those rules that the society has are simply that. They're just what the society made up. Just as quickly as you can make up this rule, you can make up a different one. And we have examples from all over the world where people were in a situation and they were told you have to do this. And they thought about it and they asked themselves, do I have to do this? And maybe they spoke against the things that they felt were not right. Maybe they paid huge prices for it. When we think of someone like Nelson Mandela in South Africa, we think about someone like Martin Luther King Jr. in the United States. Think about someone like Gandhi. All these people went to jail for differing amounts of times, but all because the society said you have to do this, and they said, no, I don't want to. It's not fair. And there were very important issues about access to equal treatment in different systems. But my point is that it was because someone looked at the system and realized we don't have to do this. I don't have to do this. And if I'm willing to sacrifice myself and for potentially maybe a greater good to change these things, people do that. Is it a very rare person who does that? Yes. That's why we know them by name. In our own little tiny worlds, which are nowhere near a magnitude of some of those examples, we need to examine these ideas that we have. You don't have to do that. If you don't like that, if you hate it, that job, that commute, that place, you don't have to do it. Every reason you tell me for why you say you have to do it is not a have to. It's either a want to or I feel that I should, which is a different situation. You need to start to pare those things down. And if you're unhappy, which is what I said, the whole reason I'm so excited and I get all emphatic and fired up about this is because it comes from, again, that unhappy and usually unhappy, angry place. I have to do that. My entire purpose of the programs, all of them, and these professional services, is to help with the solution. That's the name of the show for a reason. I'm not there just for some. I don't get satisfaction just for showing up in life. That doesn't do anything. It's not. I don't feel good if someone's has a very serious problem and we don't come up with anything that's a solution, and then I just go home for the day. I don't feel like I've accomplished all that I can. That's not enough for my personality. I want to help fix things. I do understand that people have different ideas of what being fixed means. As I said earlier, I made horrible mistakes as a lawyer early on. I was projecting my own life experience and expectations and desires onto other people, which is wrong because everybody's different. But somebody else might think it was I had fixed their problem if maybe they did spend a little bit of time, a few weeks in a local jail. But if they didn't have any other case after that, they never had any other responsibilities to go to classes or pay any more fines, some people would feel like that was fixed and that I did solve it in a way that worked for them. And then even though it's not what I would have wanted to do, because I would have wanted to go to the classes and pay whatever fine and not have ever had to go to the jail and not have a record, but we're different people. The core, though, is that I did in some way, and it wasn't the way I would want individually me, but it's what my customer or my client wanted. They felt it was solved. And that does give me some sense of, even though it wasn't what I would have individually wanted, it gives me something that makes me feel that I'm moving in the direction of being part of a solution. Not ideal, not what I would want. And my point is that we have to do this individually. We're not all going to be able to go out and save societies and change the course of history. But we can, in our own little lives, change our own course of our own little history. Why are you at that job? Why do you own that business? The amount of people I've met and communicated with who go there for whatever reason, they're in business and they're miserable. They hate it. Then why are you doing this? And a more accurate mental framework for analyzing things is to think, I choose to do this, and then think about why you choose to do it. So if you think to yourself, okay, I'll choose to follow the law. Why am I choosing that? Well, I don't like jail. I'm not interested in going to court and dealing with judges, and I don't want to waste all the time on sitting around dealing with all these problems. With my schedule, getting to and from court, and paying fines. These are all legitimate reasons in my mind why I'm going to go ahead and follow the law. Your reasons may be, well, it's the ethical thing you do, and you may have a very specific ethical framework that you utilize. You may have a religious or spiritual, right, framework. It doesn't matter, but you'll have reasons why you're doing it. And reframing things will prevent so much unhappiness. And I have to mention here, I saw another, just in my relaxation time, I was watching a show, and it had the storyline about being someone was going to go get married, and then they were left at the altar, which we've seen in how many, plays and movies and songs and for a long time. And it's because of the same thing, right? I have to do this. No, you don't. Now, I think it's a late time frame to decide you don't want to get married when somebody's standing literally at the marriage ceremony and you just don't show up, or you show up and then you run outside because you leave because you don't want to do it. It's a little bit maybe poorly timed. Yet the reality is that, again, you don't have to do it. I would again advise that you think about all these things earlier. The earlier we start thinking to ourselves that we don't have to, and we start thinking to ourselves, what are we choosing to do? It makes it a higher likelihood that we're going to get better outcomes, because we're not going to wait until not only did we say yes that we marry someone or make them think that but people went ahead and set a date and a place and paid for, arrangements. And all along, the person, I'm sure, was having some inkling that they weren't totally sold on this. You should have spoken up earlier, or you shouldn't have agreed to it until you got to a point where you were totally comfortable. Now, the other reasons why people don't do that are a whole bunch of other issues, and they're usually some sort of a fear of disappointing people, a fear of judgment, a fear of angering someone. It's just some kind of fear. But that's not an excuse for these really poor choices that we build on top of poor choices. It wouldn't happen if we got away from the idea of thinking, I have to do it. I have to do it. You don't have to do it. You don't have to do any of it. You don't want to do it, don't do it. Are there consequences? Yes. But that's what you need to think about, the consequence and the choice. Don't sit here and give me an argument that's a fallacy, that you have to, because you don't have to. You chose to. We can talk about why you chose to. We can talk about the conditions you're under. We can talk about your options you may have, which actually usually will help dissipate people's anger, because they'll start to realize, oh, wait a minute, there are other options. They're not maybe great options. Sometimes when people look at the other options, they'll realize, oh, wait a minute, I maybe should be appreciative of my situation instead of being angry. I have two quick anecdotes. So have you ever interacted with someone, and it doesn't matter what happened in their life, they're miserable? I mean, honestly, it could be like, oh, they won the Olympics, and they also won an Oscar, and they won the Nobel Prize, and they still be, unhappy and crying and complaining and grumpy. And so there's one of those people, and they were complaining about doing something with their spouse. And I think it was like traveling somewhere on some sort of vacation that their spouse wanted. Now, I'm sitting there thinking, wow, okay, so you have a spouse. You've got someone in the health that they're able to travel. You've got the resources, apparently, financially, or in the time to travel, and they want to travel with you, right? All of these things are assuming that that's a spouse that you have an interest in, really great things, right? How many people have spouses and they'd love to be able to travel? They don't have the time, they don't have the money, and or the spouse doesn't want to be with them. I mean, or they don't have a spouse at all and they want one, right? All of these are like wonderful kind of, things that you would think, wow, that's a nice thing. But sometimes when we get into this mind frame, I have to do this. I have to go with that spouse who cares about me and wants to spend time with me and has money and time and wants to go travel with me. Now, it sounds ridiculous, of course. But if you change the mindset from the have to, and you realize this is a choice, and it may, in all those instances where I think externally we may perceive the person as being completely unrealistic and ungrateful, it will help give them perspective. Instead of this have to thing, lucky you are to have anybody. It's like somebody, again, who complains, oh, my grandfather always wants me to come over and visit him, and he's always wanting to spend time with me. How fortunate are you? You have a grandfather who not a lot of people never know, because maybe they were passed away or never knew their family of origin. You have a grandfather who cares about you and wants to spend time with you. Really? That's you're complaining about that? And you'll hear it all the time. People, oh, I have to go to my children's event. And I'm thinking, you're fortunate enough, you have a healthy child, your child's engaged in activities, and you have a relationship with your child, and you've been invited, and you're complaining? But it's that same mindset, right? I have to. It's the same argument I could make about all these other things. You have a job. There are people who literally risk their lives, in something that's dangerous to try to get a job or to try to immigrate somewhere, and you're complaining because you don't like having to go to a meeting? Wow. With benefits and air conditioning? Again, it might help for some people who, I think they just lack perspective. And I think that these underlying fears, maybe they have a fear of disappointment. Maybe they had other aspirations and dreams and unmet needs that haven't been addressed, and that's what's fueling the kind of anger. Maybe the person who's complaining about having to go to their child's event, or complaining about having a vacation with their spouse, or complaining about having to go to their, office job. Maybe their, other, dream was to do something else. And so what they're really saying is, I'm angry and disappointed and scared. I'll never get to do my real passion and joy, and that's what they're upset about. But they don't phrase it like that. If they did, then we wouldn't have discussion at all, because it wouldn't even be about that. Instead of it being about, I have to do this, I have to do that, I'm so angry, I'm so mad, it would be about, how can you help me to achieve this other thing that is what I really want, which is a totally different discussion. It would be very positive and uplifting, and we could work on that. And my last anecdote was years ago. There was the highest court. The highest judiciary in the United States is United States Supreme Court. And so the first African American, Black, Negro, whatever word you want to call it for the person of the non-majority population group who was appointed and then confirmed on the Supreme Court, had he passed away, but what a character, and what an amazing person to just study in terms of history and some of the cases he argued as a lawyer before getting on the United States Supreme Court. But he had a fantastic saying in an interview that I think is a it's a quote that I think it resonates with me. So Thurgood Marshall is the gentleman's name, and I have to mention this. I had a relative that I never knew. He had passed away before I was born, but he was a relative, and it was actually, I was in a museum in Texas, a Texas State Museum, a state history museum, which is actually a wonderful museum. And I should see about putting a link to that in the show notes. And so they had an exhibit, and they were talking about history in the state, and they were talking about different legal issues, and then different types of people have been really active as lawyers. And so it happened that there was this relative of mine who was a lawyer and actually fought on cases and worked as a lawyer with Thurgood Marshall, who was the first Black on the Supreme Court of the United States. And that was really exciting to see that in the museum. I got all excited. And then I thought, see, that's exciting. So Thurgood Marshall, that was my little very weak personal 6 degrees of separation. Thurgood Marshall supposedly was interviewed one time, and somebody was saying something to him about an issue, and he had some response along the lines when he was talking about what he had to do, right? So he was, by this time, had lived a long, relatively long life. He's an older gentleman and been, of course, so successful. He'd been, appointed to the Supreme Court and had been serving there for many, many years. And apparently, allegedly, said something along the lines when talking about what he had to do. He said something like, the only thing he had to do was to stay Black and die. And what I interpret that to mean is that you don't have to do much. And part of the reason I say this, tying back to the examples I did earlier about people who globally go into the world and confront what we think we have to do, right? And so Thurgood Marshall had fought as a lawyer on some of these cases that helped change the United States legal system and the culture. People didn't have to go to separate schools based on their race, or have to live in separate places, and have to eat in different places, and have to drink different water fountains. And this all changed, right? So he's someone who had confronted this in a very powerful, direct way, right? And then turned around and was able to be the first, quote unquote, from a population to be on this very powerful Supreme Court. And my interpretation, in a positive, very positive way, was that you don't have to do any of this. His point, I interpreted to mean he's perceived in a certain ethnic or racial group, fine. Then that he's not. What can we do about that, right? In a positive way. And on the other hand, and then of course we all face, to the best of our knowledge, the end of our physical life as we know it to be, and death. Kind of, that's it. And we don't have to do much. We will die no matter what we do at some point. But based on the science and technology and understanding we have of things right now. And the rest of it, he could have said, all I have to do is stay a man, and die, or have to stay, whatever height I am and die. But basically the point is, what? I don't have to do this. I think having that perspective and the ability to understand that is, again, going to give you the ability to be grateful and appreciative of things in your life that actually are pretty good. Or they could be a lot worse. And you don't see that because you're just complaining all the time about what you have to do. Instead of thinking, wow, I have kids who are healthy and involved and want me to be in an event. I have a family member, a friend, a spouse who wants to spend time with me. I have a boss who is asking my opinion. I have a job. I have the ability I have the ability to work. So many people want to work so bad, so desperately, but physically and mentally unable to. And here somebody is complaining, right? It's like that whole idea, you know. We just take it for granted. All this stuff we take for granted. And so, again, it was a Myth Warrior show. The episode title was, You Don't Have to Do Anything That You Don't Want to Do. My argument is, this is not a myth. It is not a myth. It is accurate. You do not have to do anything you do not want to do. You need to reframe your language, and you need to reframe how you look at things in your life. You don't have to do these things. You have to take control of these choices you're making and start asking yourself, why am I choosing to do these things? There's a lot of potential upside to this. And again, it can just this simple way of changing how you look at life can do so much to diminish and redirect anger and hostility and disappointment and get somebody moving on a different path about whatever it is that they really feel that they claim that they want to do. Because you're not oppressed and abused. Even if you are in a situation where you really are being oppressed and abused. Maybe you're in a family situation. Maybe you're in a work situation. You don't have to stay there forever just being oppressed and abused. That's why I gave you these larger society examples. There's always a price to pay. But if you really are in an awful, awful situation, there's nowhere near at the end of this wrap up of this show I can really get into this in detail. But if you're in an awful, awful situation and you're aware of it, then if you do nothing, it just stays awful, awful, awful. So why don't you do something? And again, it's fear that holds people and stops them from the change that would bring them some joy. So this is again, it was a topic again that I have, in so many different ways, it means so much to me. I really do encourage you to examine your own thinking. Every time you catch yourself, I have to go there, I have to do this, I have to. No, stop. I choose to. Now, why you choose to, start working through those reasons. And most of them, you'll be surprised, are pretty rational. Oh, okay, because the alternative is, prison. The alternative is I'll have no financial resource other than what society or charity would provide for me, which will be very, very different and very limiting. So they're not unreasonable, but it'll definitely help you understand it's not a have to, it's a choose to. I'm really grateful that you joined me today on the program. I do, again, always encourage you to come to CourtneyAnderson.com. Come to our show page. Please support our show sponsors by looking at some of the programs and resources and services that are available through some of our sponsors and advertisers. Always, I encourage you to let me know what's on your mind, show suggestions, feedback, ideas, and please share the program on your on your social media. And I think I was trying to say Facebook and social media. So thank you so much for being here today.